The Lightning are looking to rebound when they take on the Oilers tonight here at Amalie Arena after back-to-back losses on the road against Philadelphia and Boston. Joining us to talk about the latest in Bolts news is Tampa Tribune's Lightning beat writer Erik Erlendsson. Erik, it seems that the Lightning have had difficulty this season on the road against Metropolitan Division opponents. So what is your biggest takeaway from those back-to-back losses?
Unexpected, I think, is probably the biggest thing to take away from it. They were riding a pretty good wave of momentum. They'd won 7 of 8. Had been playing really well. They just written a story about how they were playing the right way and their structure was all good and everything that was going on with that. So I think that was the thing that was disappointing, was that they lost their structure a little bit and they didn't maybe have the right sort of intensity, especially in the Philadelphia game. They ended up getting blown out in that game.
Now, during Philadelphia's matchup, the team lost top defenseman Victor Hedman and scoring leader Tyler Johnson. What's the outlook on their injuries? Because we saw the effect of losing those 2 players.
Yeah, it doesn't sound too serious. In fact, Tyler Johnson skated this morning. He was in a red jersey, which usually means no contact. He's still injured, but it's an encouraging sign that he was actually out there. So it sounds like there's a good chance he might be back before the All-Star break, and that's kind of important too because he was selected to represent the Lightning at the All-Star game along with Steven Stamkos.
That's a good point. And every week we do ask fans to submit questions on Twitter using hashtag #TBOBolts. You can of course also email us or submit questions on the form that we have under all of Erik's Lightning articles. This week we had a lot of great questions, so it was kind of difficult for us to narrow them down. But the first one comes from Daniel, and he asked, will anything happen with backup goalie or defenseman before the trade deadline? So Erik, what are your thoughts?
Certainly a defenseman. I think that's, and we've talked about this before, it was something that was on their radar before the last couple of weeks. When they traded Eric Brewer, it kind of hurt their depth a little bit. So I think that's something they will definitely be on the lookout for, whether that means it's a depth guy or maybe there's something a little bit bigger that Steve Yzerman might have in mind. There's really no way of knowing that. So I think defenseman is definitely something on their radar. And the goaltending will be interesting. You know, we've all seen some of the disappointments that Evgeny Nabokov has had in nets. He has not been up to par. He has not been, as John Cooper said the other night, he has not played the way that they would hope he had played. So you have to start considering that.
And we had another question, and this comes from Thomas, and he wants to know what will be the biggest priority in the trade, position or player. What do you think the focus will be for Steve Yzerman?
I think it's position. I don't think, unless it's a bigger name, unless it's a guy who's a little bit younger and has some term on his contract, those are the type of deals when you're going to start talking about packages. Those are the type of deals that you're going to look at. Other than that, I think you go for position, and to me, you can't have enough defensemen. We've seen it. You know, you can't rely, nothing against Nikita Nesterov, he's a rookie, but you can't count on him to be the guy to lead you towards the latter half of the season. Same thing with Luke Witkowski down in Syracuse. Good prospects, but you want some depth, you want some experience, and I think that's why you have to look at the position in that aspect as opposed to a particular player.
Okay, so our last but certainly not least of the tweets comes from Jared, and he thinks, do you think Bolts are focusing on defensemen more in the draft with depth at forwards in Syracuse?
It's an interesting question. I think we certainly saw in last year's draft, they used their first 3 picks were all in defensemen, Anthony DiAngelo, Dominic Machine, and Jonathan McLeod. I don't know if that was necessarily a need. Anytime we talk to Al Murray, who is our director of scouting, he always talks about we want the best player available. And if there's a tie between players, maybe then we go for position. But it's certainly, you know, we've seen the forward prospects come up through the ranks, and there's still a couple more down in Syracuse that are knocking on the door a little bit. So I don't think they draft for need. I think they draft more so for best player available. But it certainly seems that way. It certainly seems like they've gone defenseman a little bit because they don't have a whole lot of those blue chip type of prospects in the minors.
All right, well, thanks so much, Erik, and thank you guys for submitting those questions. Make sure you catch up with us next week. Use the hashtag #TBOBolts for Erik Erlendsson. I'm Olivia Stacey. Make sure to keep it right here on TBO.com for all your latest Bolts news.